I can't believe you're making me go next. Seriously, is there anything I could say that would be more powerful than that? Thank God for Ava. Well, good morning, Trinity family, here in the room and at home. You know, as I've read through the Bible, I've noticed something about Jesus that's very easy to miss, but it turns out it's pretty important. Jesus got dirty. It wasn't proper for a rabbi in Jesus' day to get dirty in any form. Spiritually, rabbis would not hang around people that they considered to be spiritually dirty, spiritually unclean. They wouldn't be found in the seedy sections of town because it would make them spiritually dirty. They wouldn't get anywhere near someone that they considered lived a sinful life or had behavioral patterns that were unholy or unacceptable because it might rub off on them and they would get dirty. They wouldn't let someone like that anywhere near the temple or the holy place. They certainly wouldn't touch someone, not physically actually touch someone who they thought was not clean. They wouldn't touch someone who was ill, sick, diseased. It would make them spiritually dirty, and a proper rabbi in Jesus' day didn't get dirty. And they wouldn't actually literally get dirty. It was unthinkable for a rabbi to get their clothes dirty or their hands dirty, but Jesus wasn't like that at all. Jesus got dirty. He got close to people who were dirty and messy. He wasn't afraid to step into the mess of someone else's life and get splattered by their dirt. He touched people who were sick. He touched people with diseases and illnesses. He got close to people. He went into sections of town rabbis weren't supposed to go into. He let people who lived sinful lifestyles touch him. He sat in their houses. He ate meals with them, exchanged food. Spiritually speaking, religiously speaking, in Jesus' day, this made him so dirty. If he were a proper rabbi, he would have to go through a very intricate series of ceremonial washings to make himself clean again after every one of those encounters. And Jesus didn't just get figuratively dirty. Jesus got literally dirty. There was a time he knelt down right in the dust of the earth at the feet of a woman caught in adultery and traced dirt with his finger to write words. We don't know what he wrote, but I bet his finger got dirty, and his knees got dirty, and his robes got dirty while he was down there. Never mind all the spiritual dirt that rubbed off on him in that scene. Jesus touched people with diseases. Jesus touched dead people. Rabbis weren't supposed to do that. Jesus sat in the house with sinners. He, one time, spit in the dirt and made a slurry of mud and saliva and rubbed it on a blind man's eyes so that he could give him sight. And he sent the blind man off to wash, but I read that and I say, well, what did Jesus do? He had that stuff on his hands. I mean, I don't mind getting dirty. I love working outside. I'll get really dirty. I've had some dirty jobs over the course of my life, but I have to be honest with you, I don't like sticky things on my hands. If that were me, I was like, what do you do with that after you put the mud on the blind man's eyes? I'd want to wash it off. If that were me, if I were Jesus, I would have done that one dry. I wouldn't have made the slurry. But Jesus didn't mind getting dirty. Think about the cross. There was nothing clean about that. Right. That was as messy and as dirty and as ugly as it got, and Jesus went there. Jesus washed dirty feet. Jesus wasn't afraid to get dirty. And every one of these acts that he chose to engage in was a choice of love. Every one of those I just mentioned was a demonstration of his love. The things that tie that together, if you look at every one of those, in every one of those instances, Jesus put his self aside. He put his own needs aside. He put his pride aside. He put his self-protection aside. When Jesus chose to love, it wasn't about him. It was always all about the other person. Choosing love the way Jesus loves is always about the other person. And sometimes it means getting dirty. And Jesus was willing to get dirty. And we're going to take a little bit deeper look at one instance of that when Jesus washed the disciples' feet. Now, I know for many of us, this is a familiar account. We're going to read the whole thing anyway. And just remember what it means to love. So I'm going to read from John chapter 13, 1 through 9. And remember what Jesus did with his disciples. This was coming toward the end of Jesus' life. He knew the cross was coming. He only had a limited time left before he would go to the cross. And he decides he's going to show his disciples just how much he loves them. And this is what he chooses to do. Of all the things he could do to show his disciples how much he loves them, this is what he does. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, "Not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus touched some dirty feet. Jesus took on the job of washing those dirty feet. And typically when I read this story, here's how I think about it. They were probably dusty. That Jesus took some water and he rinsed some dust off some feet so he could show his disciples that he loved him. What's the big deal? A few dusty feet. But that's not the case at all. The roads that they walked in Jesus' day were worse than dusty. I went back in my mind to years ago. My first missions trip to Africa was to Ethiopia. And at that day, I don't know what the roads are like now, but in that day, the roads were all dirt roads, and they were shared by cars, by people pulling wooden carts, by animals pulling wooden carts, by flocks being led by shepherds. Anyone who had to move anywhere, animal, beast, or human, would travel on these dirt roads. And yeah, they were dusty dirt roads, but they were worse than dusty because there were a lot of deposits on these roads, and there were pathways that were the same. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't walk anywhere in the areas I visited in Ethiopia that was safe or free from stepping on something gooey and gushy that would squeeze between your toes and get on your feet. It was worse than dusty. And the truth is, that's how the roads and the paths got in Jesus' day, too. Drainage was not always great. Sewage was around. And if you were not careful, your feet would get worse than dusty. They would get very muddy and dirty and gooey and worse. If you left your house with clean feet to go visit someone else in their house, by the time you got to their house, your feet were dirty. And not always just plain dirt, but smelly and disgusting sometimes too. And because nobody wanted those feet trampling around inside their house, the first thing that would happen when you visited someone or you went into a building or a home was you had your feet washed at the door so that you could walk around the house without making a mess of it. This was the custom. It happened at the door typically, not once you were reclining at the table for the meal. Usually what happened is you would come into the house, you would remove your sandals, and a servant would come wash your feet. Once your feet were washed, then you would go to the table and go through a hand-washing ceremony. That job at the door of washing feet, who wanted? Who signed up for that? Who volunteered? Who said, "I'm going to grow up to be a foot washer. Put me at the door"? Typically, that job was given to the lowest servant in your household. If you had a pecking order, if you had a hierarchy, top to bottom, the person at the bottom, the lowest person, that one got assigned the job at the door washing the feet. Nobody wanted that job. If you didn't have a servant who could do that job, sorry ladies, here's how it went. The wife got assigned that job. And it was her job to wash everyone's feet before they came to the table. This is what Jesus did. The job of the lowest servant. This person actually didn't exist in the house. If you came into someone's house and they assigned their servant to wash your feet, you didn't look at them. You didn't make eye contact. You didn't look down and say, "Hey, thanks for washing my feet." You didn't acknowledge them. You pretended they didn't exist. They washed all the goo off your feet, and you went to the table without a word. That's how it would go, because this person who washed your feet was sort of subhuman on the list. They were the lowest person in the house. And you did not interact with them, you did not acknowledge them, you did not make eye contact, you did not thank them. This was the job Jesus chose to take to show his disciples how much he loved them. And the first thing he did, the very first thing he did, was he took off his robe. Now, many times when I've read that, I thought, well, it was because he didn't want to get water on his robe, he didn't want to get that dirty, he took it off. But there's a deep significance here to Jesus taking off his robe. In Jesus' day, and it's ours too, right? What you wore identified who you were. Your clothing didn't just cover your body, it said who you wore. Like if you have a uniform on, maybe you're a policeman or a fireman. If you wore a collar, maybe you're a priest. Rabbis wore robes. Whatever you wore identified who you were. So Jesus, in effect, was taking off his identity. He was saying, I have been your Lord and teacher. I am your Lord and master. In fact, he could say, I'm the creator of everything. But I'm going to remove that for a moment and set it aside, and I'm going to become the lowest person in this household. And I'm going to wash your disgusting feet. Of course, he didn't say that. But that's really what he was doing. He was washing their feet as the lowest person in the household. And sometimes I think, yeah, he got a bowl, he rinsed off the feet, let's go have dinner. 24 feet he washed, 24 of them. And he had to go get water, and he had to get towels. Maybe he had to dump the water a couple of times because it got dirty, he had to come back and forth. This event took a little while. So these disciples sat there and absorbed what Jesus was doing. Many times we read this and we read what Jesus did, but did you ever ask why? Why did Jesus do this? Verse 1 in this chapter, you have different ways it's worded. Here are 3 different ways the Bible words this. One is, having loved his own, actually I have 4. Having loved his own who were in the world. No, it's 3, sorry. It doesn't really matter, right? Why do I keep going back and forth? He loved his own that were in the world. And it says he loved them to the end. That's one version. Another one says he loved them to the last, which means like he just loved them as much as he could all the way through, squeezed every ounce of juice out of that. But here's the one I love the most. The older NIVs say it this way. He now showed them the full extent of his love. Really? After all the ways he has loved them over the course of these years been together, this is the one, short of the cross, that shows the full extent of his love. Why? Because he put aside who he was. He lowered himself as low as he could. He raised them as high as he could. He humbled himself. He thought about their needs. He took on the dirty job. It wasn't about pride and self-protection and making sure I'm at the right place in the hierarchy. It was just about, I am going to do this thing and serve you. That's a big word, serve. You almost could say, last week I said God equals love, love equals God. That's true. But for us in our life, to show love, love equals serve, serve equals love. When we serve, we're loving. When we want to love, we serve. And Jesus, in this case, served his disciples. For us here at Trinity, this is significant for us today. Jesus loved people outside of his circle of disciples, and we're supposed to also. But here's where it starts. Here's where it starts. This group of people that Jesus showed the full extent of his love to was his community. They were his people. They were his folks. They were like his family. So this is what I want to make you think about today. How can you love your Trinity family? How can you wash someone else's feet in this room or at home or in the Trinity family? What can you do? And I'm going to give you a moment to think about that before God, because I really would like you to come up with something specific, to come away with a plan, with an application, with an idea or with a thought. But I want to read this first. Jesus said to his disciples, I do this for you. I do this for you. Now you do this for each other. So here's the rest of that passage, John 13, 12 through 14. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes. He returned to his place. He said, "Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. And now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so you should also wash one another's." So I'd like to ask you, as we just wrap up here right now, to close your eyes, to sit in the presence of God, and ask yourself this question: what can I do to wash someone else's feet? What can I do? Just ask God. If you don't have an idea, I know what's happening right now. There are some of you here in this room and at home who immediately thought of something when I said it. You said, I know I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking I should do this for this person, but I haven't done it because whatever. It's going to cost me. It's going to take time. I haven't put a plan together. I've been lazy. I haven't done it. Whatever the reasons are, you haven't done it. But I know some of you, as soon as I asked the question, you had an answer. So your job right now is to sit before God and say, God, I'm going to do this. Make a commitment. But there are probably many of us in the room who go, I don't know. I don't have an idea. So what I'm going to ask you to do is sit before God and say, God, show me whose feet I should wash. And then give me an idea of what I should do. And he will. If you ask him sincerely, he will. So my invitation, Trinity family, to you today is to wash someone's feet in this community. By next Sunday. I'll put a deadline on it. This week, how can I wash someone's feet? All right, so you close your eyes. You have one of two prayers. One is, God, I've been thinking about this and I haven't done it. Here's what I'm going to do. The other one is, God, this is a new thought for me this morning. I'm not sure what I should do. Show me whose feet I should wash and how I should wash them. We're going to choose love. Love is choosing. We're going to humble ourselves. We're going to put the needs of others first. We're going to serve. We're going to be willing to get dirty. We're going to be willing to step into the mess. We're going to deny ourselves and our self-protection and our pride. And we're going to choose to show love to someone else. So now I'm just going to give you a minute to think about that while I call the band to come up and get in place. And while you're still thinking about it before God, if God has not answered you, if you're praying, God, who should I love and how should I do it? You take that prayer home with you today. As you're praying about that and sitting before God, I'm going to read you Philippians 2, 1 through 5. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. God, give us the courage to choose love today. Amen.